this tutorial, we're going to look at different ways you can use food dye or food colouring in order to decorate your biscuits or potentially your cakes. I'm going to begin by showing you how you can colour your fondant icing. So you don't need to buy fondant icing in all different colours. You can actually change the colour of what the icing is. So I've got some white fondant icing here, and these are food gels, which means they're really, really potent in their colour. This means you only need a tiny amount of it. I'm literally mixing it into the fondant icing, and you'll see very quickly here that it is a messy job and it will stain your skin or hands. Some people might want to use disposable gloves to protect your skin and to stop it from being dyed multiple colours like mine are. So as you can see, I'm just mixing it in to turn my white icing blue. Now, food gels are slightly more expensive than food colouring, and that's because they are more concentrated in colour. So if you're using a food colouring, you'll find you'll need to use a lot more of it in order to get a bright colour like this. That can sometimes be a problem because you're making your icing more wet because you're adding more and more liquid, which is why a lot of people prefer to use food gel when creating decorations for cakes or biscuits. So as you can see, you just keep mixing it in and eventually you'll get a nice solid colour. This is a lighter blue than the food gel appears because it's been mixed with the white, so it's made it a lighter blue. If you don't mix it properly, you're going to get different tones of colour, but if you keep mixing it, like I've just done here, you'll get a solid colour that's the same all the way through the icing. And then you just use it exactly the same way as you would your fondant icing. You can roll it out, cut shapes from it, and use this to decorate. For this piece of fondant icing, I'm going to create the marbled effect again, but using food gel rather than two different coloured fondant icings. And the only difference this time is that when I start mixing the fondant and the gel together, I'm going to stop at an earlier point so that I don't get a solid colour. So I've got those different tones showing through and it creates a marbled effect in the fondant. It's always better to start with a small amount of colouring and add to it, because if you put too much in, you can't take it out again, but you can always add more if you haven't got enough. Once I've rolled out my icing and I'm really happy that it's all the same thickness all the way around, I'm going to this time use a cutter. So instead of creating a circle disc to just place on top of a biscuit, I'm going to use stamps and cutters to create more intricate shapes. So you might have some cookie cutters indoors, smaller versions, so that you can create a little bit more detail on your biscuit. You don't necessarily have to go and buy anything special for this technique. You can make use of what you already have. You could even use a knife very carefully to create your own shapes if you don't have any cookie cutters or stamps. As you can see, it's quite a quick way of getting a really nice design onto your biscuit, which if you cut that out by hand would take quite a long time. Something else you can try, again, if you've got the cutters, or you could again try doing this by cutting out by hand, is layering up your fondant. So here I'm using a simple flower shape, and then I'm scaling down to a smaller size cutter, and I'll put that on top and create a sense of depth and almost create a 3D flower to place on top of the biscuit. Now if you are putting two pieces of icing together like this, so that it has a bit more stability, what you can use is a little bit of water to act like a glue between them. So you can just dab a bit of water onto the smaller piece of fondant before placing it onto the larger piece, and hopefully it will stay stuck together and not fall apart. And you could use additional things like sprinkles and chocolate covered beads, for example, to add in other details to your biscuits. Now you can use food dye or food colouring to paint straight onto your fondant. So you need to use a food safe brush, and you can just paint over a solid colour like this images show here. Or if you wanted to, you could try and do something a little bit more detailed. So you're almost using the food dye as paint to paint a picture onto the fondant, or maybe write some words to give you more detail within your biscuit or cake.